Hello there. So as we round up this wonderful year, I think it's time we went through some general etiquette for when we join a multiplayer server. Now, we all know that it's a wild world out there, and there are players of varying kinds who enjoy different ways of playing Project Zomboid. I hope that some of these tips will help encourage a more pleasant multiplayer experience for everyone. Before we get stuck in, I want to thank you all again for your support. This channel has grown in ways that I never thought possible, and it wouldn't have happened without you. That said, let us begin. So before we head into the positive etiquette regarding multiplayer servers, let's go over some general tips for when you are playing multiplayer. Co-op is a very different ballgame to solo in a few ways. First off, vehicle desyncing is still a thing in Project Zomboid. If you and a bunch of mates decide to drive in a convoy, you may notice that your vehicle will suddenly decide to bumper kiss your friends in front of you, despite being some distance away on your screen. If you're driving in convoy, make sure you don't drive right behind them or next to them. Try to minimize the amount of vehicles you take with you on group runs if you can, and it's best to let the player with the lowest ping do the driving, or just drive yourself. Moving on to the next tip. Unless you're lucky enough to join a server on a clean wipe, most of the map will be absolutely butchered from other players scavenging, and loot will be tough to come by. If you're joining late, teaming up with a group of players will help make settling in much easier, as well as make general play more enjoyable. Public servers with loot respawn turned off make it a serious challenge if you're planning on rocking it solo. Speaking of a clean wipe, it's best to find a public server that has been wiped recently. If you aren't a fan of joining public servers and prefer to play with just your mates, which I personally recommend, a locally hosted game will give you much better control over your experience. Remember that you cannot pause time or speed it up like you can in single player. If you've been running solo for a while and hop into a server, it's very easy to let your guard down, so keep your wits about you. In my experience, your friends won't always tell you when there's a zombie creeping up on you, or will not always see it. Remember what I said about keeping your head on a swivel? That applies very strongly to multiplayer, especially when you've ventured into a PvP server. In my opinion, if you're in a group of 3 or more, at least one player should be running Lumberjack. Strong opinion, I know, but you cannot deny the effectiveness of Lumberjack as a close combat machine. The beauty of Project Zomboid multiplayer is that each player can specialize in certain areas for the good of the group. You won't have to go for a jack of all trades kind of build, and you can spend those positive trade points better. Remember, this is just my opinion. It is a sandbox after all, and your group can play however you want in your playthrough. Experimenting with different roleplay scenarios makes the game much more fun. I'll cover some good options for focused multiplayer builds in another video for you guys. I know this may seem obvious, but get your group to a bookstore and gather some skill books ASAP. In your downtime, reading these will help get your group up to speed much quicker. This combined with some VHS tapes, and you will level those skills sooner than you think, allowing you to get stuck into the fun stuff. One of the best parts of multiplayer is that the workload is evenly split, most of the time, so you can get way more done in a day than if you were playing solo. Learn to divide tasks amongst your group, and you will see your base thriving in no time. If you aren't playing on a private server, the motto for public multiplayer is learning to conserve your loot. This applies strongly if it's a populated server, where loot will be slim pickings. Lastly, we know how important it is to find yourself a nice safe house. The safe house system is great to help protect your base as well as serve as a spawn location if you make a mistake when out and about. Safe houses are limited to non-spawn locations, meaning you can't go setting up in the fire station in Rosewood, for example. In most cases, houses are free game when it comes to safe houses, but take your time to find a location that is close to resources that you would need. Okay, so now that we've gone over a few tips for multiplayer, let's go over some general etiquette for when joining public servers. Hopefully these will make the general experience much smoother. Firstly, if you're playing on a PvE server with loot respawns turned on, it's good practice to not dismantle furniture that commonly spawns loot. When you're out focusing on grinding your skills, try to dismantle things like metal fences, beds are a good option for carpentry, chairs, and so on. Containers like cupboards, shelving, etc. are there for loot respawns. Going through and dismantling loot containers makes it much more difficult for newer players to get going and hurts the longevity of the server, at least until the next clean wipe. Getting into this habit will allow everyone who joins the public server to have a fighting chance and make the whole experience more enjoyable overall. Cars are essential in Project Zomboid, as we all no doubt know. When you're hopping into a public server, securing a car can be tough. While you're out searching for a vehicle, let's talk about how you can secure one so you don't miss out. One method is to hotwire the vehicle, stamping your claim on it. However, doing this can be a little bit ambiguous, as there are a few good Samaritans out there who hotwire vehicles for newer players. Another way is to ensure that you lock the doors when you step out of the vehicle to help deter other players. If you come across a car that is hotwired or has loot on the trunk, it's best to just leave it alone, in good spirit. You wouldn't want someone coming along and doing the same to you when you've just run into the grocery store for some food supplies. Unless this is a PvP server, then by all means, it's free game. Project Zomboid is by nature a difficult game. Helping newer players can be rewarding, and you can even make some friends along the way. If you're on a friendly public server, those spare cans, bags, or even weapons that you give to a newer player can go a long way to ensure people feel welcome on the server and want to come back for more. That's it for some of my thoughts on multiplayer etiquette. I know this video was a little bit shorter than my previous ones, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked the video, consider dropping a like and subscribing. Good luck out there, Survivor, and I will see you soon.